Hey guys, this here is a follow-up to a story I did a couple of weeks ago, where there was a crappy paladin that was telling the OP's wife how to play their character, as well as correcting the OP on how to play his. So, in my last story I talked about what led my girlfriend to never want to try D&D again. She left after 2 sessions, while I stayed for 3. That 3rd session got worse than I could have ever imagined. The group consisted of a lawful neutral rogue, my cousin who was the DM and host, his wife, a lawful good wizard, myself, my cousin and I's mutual longtime friend who was playing a chaotic neutral fighter, and another longtime friend who was playing a chaotic good barbarian, and a lawful good paladin. So, we finished our last session by completing a dungeon after the Pally thwarted my girlfriend and I's evil plan of trying to have fun by doing something other than standing and hitting. After a few more encounters, we found 3 magical items: a longbow of warning, some heavy alacritus armor, and an Acron blade. Since I was the only bow user, I got the longbow of warning, clearly. But since the paladin looted both the armor and the blade, he felt entitled to both of them, despite both the fighter and the barbarian being able to use either of them. He eventually wore them both down, and the fighter and barbarian just didn't care enough to keep debating the reasons why they should have it. After that, we all decided to call it a night on our 2nd session. The next week, we decided to all meet up again, and my girlfriend, as I mentioned, declined to play again. She didn't have fun and would rather drink wine and watch movies with her best friend. In hindsight, it was probably a much better way to spend a Saturday night. When the fighter and I pulled up to the DM's house, we saw that the paladin was smoking cigarettes and drinking a Jack and Coke outside on the DM's porch. While we waited for the rest of the group to show up, I made some small talk with the paladin, but after a while, the fighter went inside, and I decided to have a tete-a-tete with him. "Hey man, do you mind chilling out a bit when we're playing? I mean, combat is fun and all, but I was kind of hoping that we could get a little bit more into role-playing. It's the part of the game that I enjoy."
Listen, this isn't the Anon show that we're watching here. You can't just fill all our time with things you want to do. You keep doing weird things like cutting holes and climbing trees during combat. You're distracting us from our goals, and I don't want to waste my time listening to you do things that I'm not involved in.
Although this comment made me furious, I decided to bite my tongue because I didn't want to get into a big conflict before we started our session. But a part of me knew then and there that this was going to be the last time that I made the hour-and-a-half drive out here. So I just got up, greeted the DM and his wife, and we got set up. We picked back up after we completed the dungeon, and I got my new bow, and the paladin now had 2 new items. The barbarian and the fighter are really chill guys, and they seem to have either forgotten or disregarded the whole magic item thing. Our characters started to make their way back to town after the dungeon, and we had a few random encounters on our way back. In our first encounter, we ran into a few bugbears. I tried to play nice and just make my turn very quickly. No hiding, no trying to get an advantage, no tactics, just shoot my bow. Just rolling a 12+5 to hit, and a 1d8+3 for damage. No sneak attacks, no fun. My damage output went from around 30+ to less than 10. The funny thing is with this paladin was that he was a complete hypocrite. Despite his "hurry, hurry, you're wasting time" attitude towards other players' turns, when it was coming to his turn, he would take an extremely long amount of time. His turns in combat were twice as long as any of the other players. And despite him being a rules lawyer when it came to a new player, as explained in the last story, I'm fairly certain he was cheating. Like, he could fly as a paladin, and I'm not sure how he was doing it, but he could sprout radiant wings and fly around. It seemed like it would be a very high-level ability, but he was doing it at level 4 or 5. And any time that you would call him out on taking long or question something that he was doing, he would just shout and kill the vibe. This guy kind of held the vibe hostage. If you challenged him, then he would kill the vibe and no one had any fun. So sometimes it's just best for everyone's enjoyment to let him do what he wants. Oh, you want to use the lucky feat for the 6th time? Sure, go for it. I just don't want to pull up all the evidence of the other times that you used it since the last long rest. Eventually though, we made it back to town, and as we entered, we see the townsfolk were setting up for an arena. We did some talking and found out that the arena had a pretty steep entrance fee. And the whole party got really excited. We all had fond memories of Elder Scrolls Oblivion and Fable. The arena was always the best part of those games, and we needed to find a way to get into the arena. The Paladin instantly started selling everything that was in his backpack, and I saw this as an opportunity to introduce some role-playing into my role-playing game. So I made my way to the inn with the Barbarian, Fighter, and Wizard, and I busted out my lute and started playing. And to add a little bit more of background here, the Fighter and the Barbarian are musicians in real life, and the three of us just finished making a music video together, so we were all really excited about the band. They started backing me up with their own instruments, and we rolled with advantage, a 12+2 and an 18+2, and the crowd went wild. The Wizard used some magic to amplify our music, and then she whipped out her hat and started collecting some cash. We ended up taking the show out of the inn and right outside of the arena. Eventually, we raised enough money to pay for our arena fees, and we even got asked by an NPC, "Who are you?" So we responded with, "Pork the Hive," a pun off of the name of the Barbarian and Fighter's real-life band. Now, while we were doing this, the Paladin was storming. His arms were crossed and he was sitting at the end of the table, red in the face, opening his mouth only to guzzle cheap whiskey. I was doing exactly what the Paladin said that he didn't want me to do, and everyone was loving it. Well, eventually we entered the arena, and it was fun, some good combat. The Paladin even got to stand and hit. I had a nice moment where I snuck into an empty suit of armor and jumped out to get a surprise attack. We all got a few moments and earned a boatload of gold. After the battle, we met with the event coordinator of the arena to collect our winnings, and I started to get an idea. "Hey Mr. Promoter, I notice you have your competition every other day. Why is that?" "Well, we need a day or two to reset our obstacles, gather new fighters and things like that." "So the venue is just closed on those off days?" "Why, yes. Yes, it is." "Well, what if I told you there was a way to make money during those off days? Not only are we a bunch of valiant fighters, but we're also one of the most popular musical acts in town right now. What if we played a show tomorrow night in exchange for a percentage of the nightly earnings?" At this, the Paladin slammed his hands on the table and yelled,
"Okay, I've had enough of this. I attack the promoter."
The Paladin rolled, hit his low AC, and burned every bit of gas that he had left on this poor NPC, completely turning him into a red paste.
"How about we take a break?"
So, I didn't know much about Paladins. It was my first time playing in a party with one. I didn't know about oaths, or what it meant and what the consequences were for breaking one. And frankly, neither did the DM. Looking back, I wish I had drilled him about breaking his oath. That was the most unholy thing I could imagine, and absolutely defiles his lawful good alignment. I got really mad. The player just killed his vibe hostage, and I wanted to get into a shouting match with him. But I figured it would just make things worse. Instead, I decided to just have a few drinks and not take the game so seriously. The Paladin joined us in drinking. We all were having some hard seltzers, but the Paladin just kept drinking his whiskey. Eventually, after we all cooled down, we tried to continue with the game. After the Paladin killed the promoter, my character yelled, "Cheese it," as I looted the winnings from the body and we ran out of the arena. There were a number of witnesses to the crime, so people started yelling and screaming, It attracted attention, so we had to fight our way out. After fighting and fleeing, we eventually ran into a bunch of these super tough guards. We rolled for initiative, but there must have been at least a dozen other characters in combat at this point. And we all rolled well, except for the Paladin. He was last in the turn order. Everyone takes their turn after a long and heated few turns of us doing a combination of fighting and running. The Paladin was next in combat, so we all looked at him, and he was passed out on the table. His head back in the chair. He was completely knocked out. So of course we did what any group of friends would do. We busted out the phones and did a whole photo shoot, posing around him and posting it as the real-life band's Instagram story. After that, we decided to call it a night, and my cousin took the Paladin's keys and set up a place for him to sleep at his house. I got a ride with the fighter back to the city, and that was the last time I played with this group. It really was a shame. I had a great time with the fighter, the barbarian, the wizard, and the DM, and the DM was actually really good. He just had a hard time dealing with problem players. I think it was his first time being put in a situation like that, and he had to choose between his longtime friend and his cousin, so he just decided not to choose. Well guys, first and foremost, this Paladin should have been kicked. Sure, I can understand the fact of having to choose between a friend and your cousin, but when your friend is being an irredeemable butt munch, then you really should kick him out of the group. This guy already scared off the OP's girlfriend in the previous story, and then the OP in this one, and probably killed the game as a whole by that third session. So if you have any interest at all in continuing a D&D game, you have to get rid of the problem players, or confront them about them and make them stop and give them a second chance, and if they, change, then there you go. But usually, getting rid of them is the better choice. I really don't like the fact that the DM apparently was this spineless coward on getting rid of this friend. If the friend was going to hold a grudge on him for kicking him out of this D&D game, and just refuse to be his friend after that, then that might not be a friend that you really want anymore. It really kinda sucks though that everyone seemingly enjoyed this, or would have enjoyed this, if they just got rid of this one person. Maybe the OP, if he has a desire to again in the future, just get all those friends back together again, and his cousin, and his girlfriend. Show her that, actually no, it can be fun. But in any case, that's the end of the story. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And, as always, have a good one.